Hi there, I'm Kimberly, a freshly turned 29-year-old. Once upon a time, I made the less than wise choice of marrying a man with a suitcase full of issues, thinking, in my naive optimism, that love could cure anything. I thought I'd be the one to show him his own worth. Oh, how mistaken I was. Love is powerful, yes, but it isn't a magic spell that can make someone respect or care for themselves. My ex, let's call him Joseph, was deeply entangled in his parents' expectations. Not the regular, I want to make my parents proud type of thing, but an all-consuming need to please them, where their approval defined his self-worth. Then there were his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ellis. They seemed only distantly interested in Joseph's life, leaving him constantly vying for their attention. It was heartbreaking to watch him try to fill the emotional void they left behind, a gap I knew I couldn't replace. The situation only worsened when Joseph began draining our savings on whatever extravagant thing his parents fancied. We're talking lavish gifts, luxury vacations, and costly splurges that felt more like attempts to buy their affection. Watching our money flow into Mr. and Mrs. Ellis's hands became a huge stressor in our relationship, causing endless arguments. Competing for his priorities felt like a losing battle, and the strain was overwhelming. Even amid the chaos, I cared deeply for Joseph. I hoped he could break free of his parents' expectations and find happiness on his own terms. But as time went on, it became painfully clear that my support alone couldn't counteract the pull they had on him. The breaking point, however, came unexpectedly. One evening, Joseph approached me with a look that hinted he had something serious to share. By then, I was used to the roller coaster, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. Kimberly, there's something important I need to talk about, he started, his tone already tense. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep calm but feeling the tension build. My parents are retiring soon, and I want to surprise them with a luxury vacation, he explained, his eyes lit with a mix of excitement and worry. That sounds nice, but if we're talking about a big expense, it should come from your personal savings, not our joint funds, I replied, hoping we could avoid yet another financial clash. I can't cover it all on my own. I was hoping we could use our savings, he admitted, looking at me hopefully. Joseph, if we can't comfortably afford it, maybe we should consider a smaller gift, I suggested, trying to keep us grounded. He bristled. You just don't understand. I love my parents and want to give them something memorable. Love isn't about counting every dollar, it's about grand gestures, he argued, his voice heated. But love also means building a future together, and that means financial stability too. This trip may mean a lot to them, but we have our own priorities, I reasoned. Joseph remained adamant. I have to do this for them. I thought you would understand, they mean everything to me. And you mean everything to me, Joseph, but we have to be realistic. We can't pour all our savings into this, I countered, searching for compromise. He snapped, calling me selfish, blind to the gesture's importance. Joseph, it's not about selfishness, it's about practicality. We can't blow $85,000 on this, I said, stunned at the amount he'd had in mind. When he casually mentioned that we'd make it back eventually, my patience broke. This was the breaking point. Really, Joseph? That's not how this works, I shot back, my sarcasm barely concealing my disbelief. Our views on love, responsibility, and financial priorities had finally reached a breaking point. As our voices escalated, so did the chaos around us. Objects flew, crashing and shattering, punctuating our intense argument. Amid the turmoil, Joseph dropped his ultimatum. If I couldn't support him, he wanted a divorce. I could see he expected me to panic, to cling to whatever was left of our marriage, but I didn't. Instead, I gathered every ounce of calm and strength I had and said, okay, Joseph, if that's what you want. The shock on his face was almost satisfying. He had anticipated tears, maybe even pleading, but all he saw was my unyielding stance. I was done enabling his fantasies. If he wanted to waste his future in a constant chase for validation from his parents, he was free to do so, without me. I made it clear that his endless need for his parents' approval was as futile as trying to shield oneself from a storm with an umbrella. He tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand, signaling I was finished with this exhausting fight. I explained how worn down I felt battling for a love that seemed more directed at his parents' expectations than at us. Go ahead, Joseph, spend everything chasing people who hardly notice, I said, resolute, determined to end the cycle of disappointment and misplaced priorities. At that moment, reality hit him. The harsh truth of our relationship finally settled, and we both knew it was time to call a truce and part ways. A month has passed since our divorce was finalized, and the freedom I feel now is incredible. Gone are the days of desperate approval seeking, endless arguments over finances, and trying to live up to expectations I never stood a chance of fulfilling. Each day now feels lighter and brighter. Joseph has attempted to re-enter my life, cloaked in concern and questions about my well-being, but I can see through the pretense. I won't be drawn back into that trap again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I firmly declined his efforts to revive what was gone. It dawned on me how much I'd invested in trying to change someone who didn't want to grow. I needed to focus on my own joy. Rebuilding wasn't easy, dividing assets and adjusting to a new financial reality required patience. I was used to a certain lifestyle, but adapting came naturally. With hard work, I was slowly rediscovering my independence. Reconnecting with old friends, reigniting hobbies I'd neglected, and exploring new interests made life feel full again. I embraced this fresh start, despite the doubts and occasional loneliness. Healing takes time, and getting used to a new budget was challenging, but each day, I felt reassurance in knowing I wasn't sacrificing my happiness to appease someone else's insecurities. Perhaps the ease with which I moved forward was a sign that I'd clung to a lost cause for far too long. It was surprising how much I could achieve without the weight of that burden. So here I am, a month later, still adjusting but thriving nonetheless. Joseph's attempts to contact me took on a new tone. Now he was casting himself as the protagonist of a tragic story, claiming to be in danger and pleading for a meeting. Growing weary of his messages, I decided it was time to face this head-on. In the middle of his latest series of frantic messages, I called him. Joseph, we've talked about this. We're divorced now. It's time to let go and move forward, I said firmly. Kimberly, please, I just need a chance to explain. I'm in serious trouble, and I have no one else to turn to, he pleaded. Maybe it was the unfamiliar sound of his voice, or perhaps there was a trace of real fear in it, but against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. Fine, but not at my place. Let's meet at that cafe we used to go to. No games, Joseph, understood? Thank you, Kimberly. I swear, I just need someone to listen. You're the only one who gets me, he replied, his voice flooded with relief. I know what you're thinking, Kimberly. Why meet with Joseph after all of this? Believe me, I questioned it myself, but sometimes, a mix of curiosity and lingering concern pushes us to give in. If only for closure, part of me still cared, divorced or not. So there we were, seated across from each other in that cozy cafe, the familiar scent of coffee thick in the air, but even the comforting aroma couldn't ease the tension between us. I watched Joseph with his anxious, pleading eyes. It was almost amusing to see him trying to pull on my heartstrings again. This time, though, I was fully in control. Leaning back, I kept my expression calm. All right, Joseph, you've got my attention. What's this danger you're supposedly in? Just so we're clear, I'm done playing the hero here. I'm not here to bail you out again. Joseph let out a shaky breath. Regret and desperation etched across his face. I could see he wanted sympathy, but I steeled myself against any emotional pull. I know I've messed up, Kimberly, but this time, it's serious. I've gotten involved with the wrong people. I owe them a lot of money, and they're not exactly patient, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I raised an eyebrow, more than a little skeptical. Oh really? Dangerous people? Is this going to be another story about your so-called friends who always seem to invite trouble? I couldn't hide my disbelief. His face clouded with frustration and hurt, clearly hoping for a more sympathetic response. No, Kimberly, this isn't made up. I'm in real trouble, and I came to you because I have no one else, he insisted, his desperation palpable. Let me guess, after the divorce, things spiraled, and now you're in debt. Was it that trip you wanted so badly to give your parents? I asked, voice rising in spite of myself, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. I gave them an apologetic look, trying to calm myself. Joseph looked down, defeated. Yeah, I got caught up in something stupid, but now it's bigger than anything I can handle alone, he admitted, his gaze pleading for understanding. My frustration boiled over. How could he barge back into my life with yet another crisis? But beneath the anger, a small part of me felt a lingering sympathy. How much are we talking about? I asked, bracing myself. $45,000, he said, almost in a whisper. 45,000? Joseph, are you out of your mind? My outburst drew more stares, but this time I didn't care. Anyone in my shoes would likely react the same way. Please, Kimberly, I'm begging you. I know I've made a mess of things, but you're the one person who really believed in me, he pleaded, his eyes reflecting a glimmer of the person I once loved. But those days were gone, and my priority was now my own well-being. Don't even try that with me, Joseph. It's far too late for heartstrings. When you asked for help, I didn't expect it to be this reckless. 45,000? You've completely lost touch with reality, I said, my voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. Overwhelmed, Joseph began to cry, oblivious to the looks from nearby patrons. Joseph, calm down. This isn't the place for a scene. What happens if you don't pay? I asked, needing to understand the full extent of his situation. They're threatening me, Kimberly. I'm not exaggerating. I'm genuinely in danger, he managed between sobs. Recognizing the gravity, I softened slightly. All right, Joseph, start from the beginning. Tell me what's really going on, I urged. Slowly, he recounted the story, describing how he'd taken a reckless loan to finance the extravagant trip he'd planned for his parents, expecting a friend to cover him. When that friend bailed, he was left with an enormous debt and a dangerous lender. Listening, I felt a flood of mixed emotions, anger at his choices, but also a strange sense of irony. So let me get this straight, you went into debt with shady people, all to impress your parents, the same people who barely acknowledge you, I said, my tone laced with exasperation. Joseph's face fell, tears tracing down his cheeks as he admitted the painful truth. Yeah, it's as if I don't exist to them since they got back, he confessed, the remorse thick in his voice. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore the hint of sympathy I felt for him. This was a painful reality check, and Joseph had to confront the consequences of his actions head-on. Joseph, I know the last thing you want to hear is, I told you so, but this was inevitable. I warned you it wasn't wise. You even chose to end our marriage over it, and now, here you are, facing the fallout. You invested everything seeking their approval, only to be met with silence. It's a hard lesson, but it's one you needed to learn, I said, my words heavy with both regret and resolve. It was clear to both of us that this moment was a turning point. Joseph had tied his self-worth to people who couldn't appreciate his sacrifices, and I finally had to accept that I couldn't protect him from himself. I had hoped that facing these consequences would make him realize I had always been on his side, that his need for approval had been his undoing. The weight of our past, of broken promises and lost dreams, hung heavy in the silence between us, and I realized it was time to let go. No more chances, no more attempts to fix what couldn't be mended. Joseph needed to face this on his own, and I had to pursue my peace elsewhere. I hope you find a way through this, Joseph, I said quietly, surprised by the finality in my own voice. He looked at me, wide-eyed. So, you're not going to help? What? No, Joseph, I can't help you. Why not? Because I don't have the resources to bail you out, and even if I did, there's no way I'd take on a lifetime of debt to fix your mistakes. I have to be responsible, for both of us, I replied, my patience thinning. Please, Kimberly, I'm begging you, he persisted, desperation sharpening his tone. Joseph, expecting me to step in and clean this up is unrealistic, I said firmly. You're my ex-wife, not my enemy, he shot back, still clinging to hope, but our paths had diverged too far, and my journey was now about finding stability, free from the chaos that once held us both back. And that's the issue, Joseph. You assume I'll always be there to fix your mistakes because I used to, but I can't, and shouldn't, keep doing that. I don't owe you anything, not after how our hard-earned money went to people who couldn't appreciate it, I said, my voice resolute. It's because I love them, Kimberly. Maybe so, but I love myself too, and part of that is protecting my peace. Joseph's gaze fell. He understood now that I wasn't going to rescue him this time. If you're out of options, here's my advice, leave, go somewhere far where they can't find you, and if you can't do that, then I don't know what you expect from me. His silence shifted, an edge of irritation creeping in as he realized my stance wasn't budging. It's time for us to part ways, Joseph. We both deserve a life free from this cycle of turmoil, I said, hoping he'd understand. If you really cared, you'd help me, he muttered bitterly. Goodbye, Joseph, I'm changing my number, I replied, standing to leave. As I walked away, Joseph remained seated, his face clouded with a mix of emotions. I knew this was the right step, however difficult, for the sake of my happiness and self-respect.